Dr. Nate here at Thrive Dental, and I want to talk to you about rubber bands, specifically rubber bands in orthodontics, how they work, what size they are, what they're doing. So this is going to be Orthodontic Rubber Bands 101. Let's first start off with the differences in sizes and thickness of rubber bands. At our office, we use a 3/16 of an inch diameter rubber band, and we have different thicknesses amongst those. So if it's thicker, obviously it's stronger. If it's thinner, obviously it's weaker. But for us, we really use only kind of one size at our office. There's a ton of different sizes, a ton of different thicknesses, with a ton of different names on the actual boxes themselves. That doesn't matter. You don't really need to know this because this is Rubber Bands 101. This isn't Rubber Bands 201 or 301. In this particular example, I just want to talk to you about what happens at our office. So yes, 3/16 right now is the size. That may change, and we have different thicknesses. So if you're using something that's thicker, you know it's going to be more discomfort or a little bit more difficult for the patient. If it's thinner, it might be a little easier. So oftentimes we'll start off with a thinner rubber band and then work our way up to a stronger one just to get the patient used to it. So what are rubber bands trying to do? It's very simple. The rubber bands, as you pull them, they get stretched out. They always want to come back together. You pull, they come back together. And honestly, that is the concept of all our rubber bands. And if you think about that, it's going to make more sense when I tell you what the exact rubber bands are doing. So keep that concept in mind. I know it's super simple, but actually if you know that and you think about that, all of these rubber bands are going to make sense. So let's start off with the least common, but I'm still just going to go step by step. So this is the least common rubber band, and it's something called the Class 1 rubber band. So Class 1 rubber band is this. It's when you put a rubber band only on the top teeth or only on the bottom teeth. They're not crisscrossing from up to bottom or anything like that. So what they are trying to do is they're basically just trying to close gaps. Most of the time, that's what we're trying to do. So we'll put it maybe from the top canine to the top molar, and the patient will constantly change those rubber bands out. And ideally, that's just giving the power chain or whatever you have on those teeth just a little bit more strength to close spaces. 99% of the time, that's what we're doing for a Class 1 rubber band. And I don't use Class 1 rubber bands that often unless we're having troubles closing a space, and then I'll ask the patient to wear them. As I'm talking about this, I forgot to mention, I want to talk to you about how much rubber bands are supposed to be worn. Typically, most of the time, we say rubber bands are supposed to be worn 24/7. That means day and night, sleeping, work, school, wherever it is, you should be wearing those rubber bands most of the time. If you don't wear those rubber bands 24/7 or the patient doesn't wear it 24/7, likely you won't get the results you are looking for. Most of the time the patient should change those rubber bands at least 3 or 4 times a day. And this isn't an exact science, but basically what you want to do is you want to refresh those rubber bands because when they're in your mouth, they lose their elasticity. So the more you change them out, the more strength that rubber band can give, and the more fresh those rubber bands can be, and the quicker, hopefully, potentially, your result can be. So we went through Class 1 rubber bands. Remember, that's like, I probably use them 1 in 100 times. Like not very often, but I just want to go step by step. So that's Class 1. Let's go to Class 2, which is actually contrary to Class 1. Class 2 we use on probably 80% of the patients. We use them a ton. If you're watching this and you have had braces or going through braces or know somebody who has been through braces, they've probably worn this type of rubber band. And what it is, it goes from the top canine to the first molar. So let's think about this concept again. Remember, we're stretching out the rubber bands and they just want to come back together again. So if you're wearing a rubber band from the top canine to the lower molar, it's basically going to try to bring back the top teeth and bring forward the bottom teeth. So think about this. You wear a rubber band from top to bottom, the top teeth want to come backwards and the lower teeth want to come forward. So if you have a big overjet, we call it, where the top teeth are sticking out too far compared to the bottom teeth, you wear those Class 2 rubber bands and it can correct it. Most of the time we wear them on both sides. We can evenly bring the lower jaw forward and the top teeth back. But if you're asymmetric, you have a midline here and the lower midline over here, you may wear rubber bands only on one side. And I get that question all the time. Hey, my orthodontist only make me wear rubber bands on one side. Why? That is the reason. If you're asymmetric, if your top teeth are over here, your bottom teeth are over here, a lot of times we'll have rubber bands just on one side to help push those teeth forward and to the left in that particular case. So that is why sometimes you're just going to wear rubber bands on one side. So let's recap. Class 1, only on the top or only on the bottom. most of the time to close spaces. Class 2, that's if you have a big overjet. If you don't know that terminology, go to my other video where I explain overjet versus overbite. But overjet is when the top teeth are sticking out too much horizontally. Not vertically, but horizontally. So if they're sticking out too much, you're gonna wear the class 2. What do you think the next one is? Class 3. So class 3 is basically the same concept as class 2, just reversed. So class 2 is from the top canine to the lower molar. Class 3 is actually from the top molar to the lower canine. So what do you think that's going to do? That's going to be kind of the same concept. So let's just flip this guy around. If you have an underbite where the lower teeth are too far ahead compared to the top teeth, you'll likely get those class 3 rubber bands. And what's that going to do? Same concept. So you have your lower teeth here, it's an underbite, your top teeth here. You have your rubber band from here to here. It wants to push these top teeth out and bring these lower teeth back to give you a good bite. That is a class 3 rubber band, and we probably use that maybe in like 10 to 15% of the patients, maybe even less than that. So those are the top 3 ones. Those are class 1, 2, and 3. And there's one special one that we use a lot of times too to finish cases. Most of the time this is towards the end. Sometimes if you have a high canine, like it's really high or some other teeth are really high up, you use this to bring the teeth down. And this is called the triangle rubber band. Some people call it a delta. I call it a triangle rubber band. So what does it look like? A triangle. So most of the time, it goes from your canine to your lower canine to your lower first premolar. So top canine, lower canine to lower first premolar. And so that obviously is going to look like a triangle. And what's that doing? Same thing, top to bottom. It just wants to pull things together, right? You stretch it up, and then it wants to come back together. So that's a triangle rubber band. So if we're trying to finish cases, everything looks nice and straight, but man, there's a small open bite. The teeth aren't quite fully coming together. We'll do something called that triangle rubber band. So there you have it. That's how easy peasy it is. There's really mainly 4 rubber bands. 1 we don't really use much, so I kind of mainly say 3 rubber bands. You have a class 1, we don't really use that much. Class 2, if you have that big overjet, remember the top teeth are sticking out too much. Class 3, opposite, you have an underbite. The lower teeth are sticking out too much compared to the top teeth. That's going to make it better. And then the triangle rubber band, and that is to bring the teeth together. So now you know all about rubber bands. Let me recap the size. Remember, there's lots of different diameters of rubber bands. For us, we use a 3/16 of an inch rubber band. The only way to make them stronger or weaker in this particular case is change the thickness. So you'll see on the packages, some of them say strong. That just means the rubber band is physically thicker than a weak one or a medium one. And how much are patients supposed to wear them most of the time? When we start off, we say patients are supposed to wear them 24/7, and they need to change out those rubber bands at least like 3 or 4 times a day. The more, the better. So that's why we give them packages of like 50 or 100 in the package so that they do not run out. Okay guys, if you went through this series with me, you know a lot about orthodontics. You know the general concepts of orthodontics. You know how to take pictures. You know to enter those pictures into the computer and into the various locations. And now you know rubber bands. So you're pretty much like a orthodontic assisting pro. So thank you for joining me on this little journey, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video.